Okay, in this video, we're going to talk briefly about the fall of Sparta, the rise of Philip II of Macedon, and then his son, Alexander the Great. So, a couple of things here then about what's transpiring during this period of time. So, we're really looking here at the 4th century BCE. So, we've had the Peloponnesian Wars, these wars that have been taking place between different city-states in the Peloponnese and just west of Athens, including Athens itself. And after that, there was the Corinthian War, so between 395 to 387 BCE. So Athenian light infantry became very effective against the older traditional, what we call the hoplite phalanx of Sparta. So Sparta had gained a great reputation for the ways in which the men would be brought together and they would work as a unit. And so that had proven itself to be very effective to all kinds of counterattacks. But now the Athenian light infantry was demonstrating ways that they could be more effective. And at the Battle of the Lyceum, Corinth's port in 390, that is when Athens then was able to defeat the phalanx. So this was, quite upsetting or quite, significant to deter Sparta from being able to advance. So the Athenians used as well peltas, which were paid soldiers who were skilled in javelin throwing, and but these paid experts could not be afforded by the smaller city-states. So that gave the Athenians an extra advantage as these fights between the city-states in the Peloponnese and with Athens were ongoing. But Sparta, although it was, defeated, it still maintained its strength as its own city-state. Now, Philip of Macedon, so we have here Macedonia. Macedonia is north of Athens. It's north, really, kind of Greece. And Philip is able to acquire a position, a role, after his father's death, and he was able to train men in a way that was very effective, and he ends up defeating Athens and Thebes. Thebes is just north of Athens in 338. And he's going to form kind of a federation. So Philip, as a Macedonian, will wear the title or the designation as king. Now, the Athenians don't really have kings. They have these, kind of oligarchies or this democracy, sort of democracy that is in place. So he's not king of the Greeks, but he is king of Macedon, and he is kind of like a defender for Greek city-states, all with the exceptions of Sparta. Sparta still maintained a kind of independence, still was resistant, still distrustful of the Macedonian, and so Sparta didn't really join in with the alliance. And that's going to become problematic for not only someone like Philip, but particularly for Alexander the Great as well. So with these federations that's kind of formed under the influence of Philip, the plans that Philip has now is to attack Persia, because Persia has taken over these Greek colonies that are in Asia Minor, and they were as well making attacks into the Greek mainland. And so Philip, in a sense, wanted retribution. Philip had already gained quite a significant amount of territory in northern Greece along the coast, places around like Thessaloniki and places, like Neapolis in the northern part, and then along up towards the Black Sea. He was able to make significant victories. So his army has demonstrated that they are effective soldiers. Now, again, remember that armies only fight. And when I'm talking about armies, this is not people who are paid as an infantry by a government, but these are people who have skills and trainings and will join the fight, train for fights, and join a fight because as you conquer different places, you enrich yourself and you can send your treasures or whatever resources you acquire back home. So that's how, in a sense, you get paid. And, of course, as well, Philip can raise money to as well pay soldiers for service. So then what happens? Philip II is assassinated. Really quite a remarkable type of scene. He had acquired an injury to his eye. So, a lot of times you'll see images of Philip with a one eye that is missing or a patch over one eye. And he had made some very significant battles, and he was getting ready to enter into a kind of a stadium, an arena, where he was going to be lauded and praised as this great victor. And in the hallway, as it were, someone assassin kills him. Now, there's a lot of debates and theories about who all was involved with the assassination. It looks like it may have been someone who felt slighted by advances that Philip had given to other individuals that neglected somebody else. Sometimes there's theories that Alexander the Great's mother, Olympias, may have orchestrated the death of her husband so that Alexander could become the next one. But Alexander's quite young. And it wouldn't be quite sure whether or not Alexander would replace Philip. So that would have been quite a dangerous move on Olympias's part. Anyway, Philip is assassinated, and this makes way for Alexander to demonstrate whether or not he has the skills and the abilities to take over his father's soldiers, his father's military, and be able to win his own battles. So, said some scholars do speculate that Alexander was behind the murder of his father, but there are other who throw that into disrepute. And so I have a reference here to a resource that I have used in other courses. Upon his father's death, Alexander then defeated Greek cities in the north, who saw this maybe as an opportunity to break free from Macedon, especially the place like Thebes. And so in the north and the west, and so once again he asserts his ability. He holds again another kind of conference, as it were, of these city-states, with the exception of Sparta, and is able to get them all on board that they would supply Alexander with men who are going to go and complete this task that Philip II was not able to do. So part of the lore with Alexander the Great is here's a young man who is very confident in his abilities and what he really wants. And his father had a great reputation. His father had accomplished more than any other Macedonian king had done before. And so here his father, who had all this accolade, and he wants to be able to demonstrate that he is as good or better than his father. So his father was not able to engage the Persians, and so now Alexander is going to take that on. So while Alexander was fighting new territories, though battles are going to continue in Greece between city-states, so places like Sparta and others. So, it's not that Greece was a unified, nation on its own. It still had these city-states, and but several of them were, helping to support Alexander. But of course, it's always dangerous because Persia has influence in the area. The Persians had fleets and ships, and it had used to conquer many of the islands, the Greek islands. And so they were always kind of in the neighborhood, and there's different people who thought it's best to side with the Persians. Don't be misled by Alexander. He's not going to be able to beat the Persians, and so we're better off, aligning ourselves with the Persians. The Persians will will leave us alone to some part as long as we, pay tribute. So there was always this kind of back and forth fighting and differences between how Philip was viewed, how Alexander was viewed by the Greeks. So, but Alexander demonstrates that he too is able to take what really is Philip's army. Philip trained them, and then now Alexander is leading them, and he is able to lead them into a vast amount of area. Now, the Persians also had a vast amount of areas under their control, but here is Alexander who's going to expand Macedonian control in a way that no Macedonian probably ever would have imagined. So you can see here I've got a little map that demonstrates the extent of this. And so, there you have the areas in orange. It's including all these islands. It's including the mainland of Greece, although, places like Sparta, may not have been on board. There were islands that, were vacillating. But he is going to move along the coastline because the coastlines pretty much he needs the ports in order for ships to bring resources. So you got to feed an army, you got to provide resources for an army. So if you go too far inland at any time, that becomes more difficult to keep the army going. So he primarily stays along the coast until after he takes Egypt, and he kind of makes an interesting visit out to a place where there's supposedly a diviner, and kind of just below what we might call Libya, Cenchrea. He goes out to this one area, returns back to Egypt. He gets kind of acknowledged as the son of Zeus, and that he's going to have more victories. And so he pushes on, taking more and more of Darius. So we have Darius is the Persian king, and he loses one of the first battles there in Asia Minor, and then he has to retreat. So he loses face because his army is defeated by Alexander's. But there will become another great battle that will take place more in towards the interior. So once Alexander, went through places like Tyre on the coast and down through Gaza and into Egypt, and then back through, making a stop off around Jerusalem, and then starts heading north and then east. This is where Darius needs to prepare an army. He doesn't want to risk another defeat, and so he's making plans of where he's going to meet Alexander. So the map shows you that after he defeats Darius, then he's able to push even farther into the east, taking over, as it were, basically areas that had once been occupied by the Persians. So, as he conquered these territories in Asia, previously held by the Persians, he granted freedoms to these cities that had been subjected to different Persian oligarchies, or you might call them satraps. So these are administrators who were responsible for overseeing, making sure Persian administration was enforced, Persian laws was enforced, and so Alexander was presenting himself as a deliverer of people. Now, some were not quite sure, are we just changing one despot for another despot? But, Alexander did not stay around for very long in any city, months, at best, except for one time when he got sick and he had to stay a little bit longer. But generally, he doesn't stay very, very long, and he's pushing his army through. Tyre, off the coast of, what today we call maybe Lebanon. Tyre took a long siege. It was a fortified island just off of the coastline there in Lebanon, and it took quite some time to bring it under to subjection. But once he was done with that, then he moved faster. So he continues and he acquires Egypt really with little resistance because the Persians have backed up all the way into Babylon. So the army is not really there. People are hearing about how effective Alexander's army is, and especially when Alexander has to lay siege to a place like Tyre. In other words, they don't give up. They don't, welcome him. And if they put up a strong fight against him, then he is brutal to the people who are there. He did make some ways for people to escape his brutality, but if they didn't take advantage, like for instance in Tyre, he said that if anybody wants to live, they had to go and hide themselves in a temple. So in the city of Tyre, some people did, but other people did not, and those that were caught were, executed or killed, and sometimes in very graphic ways. So that sends a message that if you resist me, you can face a very brutal death. So there was some resistance in Egypt, but not nearly what he had faced in other places. So he acquires that in 332 BCE. And of course, Egypt is strongly influenced in the region of Judea. So you'll note then this conquest of Alexander in the map going all the way to the very borders of India. And so Alexander will never get back to Macedon. He will die before that happens. Generally, though, Alexander allowed the conquered peoples to carry on with their traditional laws and customs as long as they paid tribute, as long as they kind of paid their taxes. He left them alone. He incorporated their behaviors. As well, he tried to acknowledge their cultures when he could and respect their gods. And so this is the way in which Alexander oftentimes would win favor of people that he was taking over. So Alexander the Great is going to end up dying then while he's out fighting a battle, and then his empire is going to be broken up amongst different generals who had been assisting him or his father earlier on, and those who were supporting him or with him in these campaigns into Egypt and then into Babylon. So we will leave that with the fall of Sparta, Philip II, and the rise of Alexander the